Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the ongoing Indian atrocities in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Our foreign minister today said that we will not let anyone take away Kashmir from the Kashmiri people. Now, a lot has been going on, as we all know, and this is not only limited to Kashmir anymore. If you look at the overall scenario, you would see that whether you talk about the Indian farmers or you talk about the Indian minorities, whether Jains or you talk about the Dalits, whether Christians, Sikhs, or people from any other minorities segment, I mean, they have been tortured, I would say. Whatever is going on in, or rather, in and out of Delhi is not a joke anymore. More than 2 million Sikh farmers, mostly from Punjab and Haryana, though people have joined them from UP as well as from Rajasthan also. They have been protesting against these laws that would take away that right to sell the wheat on their on reasonable prices. But now, since the multinational corporations, they've all supported the Indian Prime Minister, so they want their own share of the pizza. To talk about today's program, let me tell you about the details. Today we'll be talking about India's siege of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and state-sponsored terrorism has to end. United Nations needs to play its responsibility in resolving Kashmir conflict and implement its resolutions on Kashmir. We'll be further talking about the Modi regime that has subjected the Kashmiri people to inhuman atrocities and deprived them of their right under United Nations resolutions. Furthermore, we will not let anyone take away Kashmir from the Kashmiris. This cause and struggle is just, sacred and non-negotiable. Pop star Rihanna and climate activist Greta Thunberg have drawn the ire of the Indian government after they tweeted in support of the huge protests against the new farming laws. And just imagine the kind of following these two superstars have. And members of India's governing Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, and its supporters regularly brand their critics traitors, propagandists, and anti-nationals. And Greta said that it has been cited in the case filed by the Delhi police that alleges an overseas conspiracy and an attempt to promote enmity between various groups. So this is something pretty interesting, and there are certain tweets also. Let's see, what do they say? Rihanna has tweeted, why aren't we talking about this? Talking regarding the protests which are going on. Greta Thunberg says we stand in solidarity with the farmers' protest in India. Greta further stated that I still stand with the farmers and support their peaceful protest. No amount of hate, threats, or violations of human rights will ever change that. And the Congressman Jim Costa serves on the Agriculture, Natural Resources and Foreign Affairs Committee, says the unfolding events in India are troubling. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I am closely monitoring the situation. The right to peaceful protest must always be respected. So these are the international figures talking about the ongoing protests in India. And interestingly, now it has become a case where all these individuals, they have also come up with their own version now. And interestingly, the Modi government is still not going to accept whatever the demand and the legitimate demand of the farmers is. Interestingly, they say that, well, for the next 18 months, we can halt this kind of a decision. And remember, when the Bharatiya Janata Party proposed this, it was immediately accepted in the lower house, which they call Lok Sabha, and then after 3 days it was approved by the upper house, that is Rajya Sabha. So you can well imagine the kind of chaos that this decision has created, and because it was taken in haste, and now this has resulted in all what you see on the television screens. To talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Afshan Tehseen Bajwa Sahiba. She's an expert on foreign affairs. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. And we will be joined on Skype by Hamid Khan Saab, who's a senior analyst, and also retired Raza Khan Saab, who is also a senior analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time as well. And on telephone, we'll be talking to Mandeep Singh Bajwa, who's a columnist and a journalist based in Delhi, India. Ma'am, let me put the first question to you. I mean, it's been almost over 2 months now, rather 3 months, I would say, that these protesters, they have gathered around Delhi, and they have a very legitimate right regarding the three new laws that has been, they have been introduced by not consulting them, and primarily it seems that the multinational corporations and the corporate setup primarily will be benefited from that. Regarding the support price or the sale and purchase of the produce, and other than that, I mean, when you talk about interest rate or out of it, these are the real concerns, very legitimate concerns of the farmers. That is on one side. But having said that, ma'am, forget about the rest of India, and how can we do that? Look at what is happening in Kashmir, and tomorrow is the 5th of February, and that is going to be observed as a black day. Throughout the globe, all the Kashmiris would be protesting. Now, what exactly is Modi up to, ma'am? Forget about the Muslims. He's after Sikhs, he's after Jains, he's after Dalits, he's after every single minority other than the Hindus. Your take, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I think we have been raising this issue since decades, but now slowly and gradually the whole world had witnessed that how Modi is in a state of denial, and he is obsessed with this Hindutva philosophy. And it started with Kashmir, but now we see that he has started the same within India also. There used to be a time when India was known as secular India, but now you see all the minorities in India are suffering as badly as the people of Kashmir are suffering, having their
correct.
right of self-determination and enjoying the rights of citizens of that state. So we have to see how this India is slowly and gradually exposing to the world at large, and the indicators are that now the international human rights activists, the known celebrities, the Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, European Parliament, US Congress, everywhere this sound is echoing that India is badly damaging the basic rights of citizens of its state, and particularly the minorities.
Correct.
And they are just using, just like a dictatorship regime, they are moving forwarding without considering the rights and wrongs and the basic, principles of human rights.
Correct.
And particularly if I talk about Kashmir, definitely they are deliberately doing all those actions which are entirely against the human rights norms. And they are breaking all those principles by totally subjecting the citizens of Kashmir and subjecting them to human rights violations, and they're using tactics like rape as a weapon of war. They are badly suppressing those people in India, Kashmir, and both now India, particularly women and children, by keeping them in detentions, by torturing them, by keeping a denial of all their basic rights, be it a right to free, information, internet. Even they can't purchase online. If they can't even do their groceries, they can't even call their doctors. So if you talk about education, if you talk about health, if you talk about any economic activity, the right to live is totally banned upon the people of Kashmir. And now we are seeing the same atrocities extended to India, where all those people who have been living for years and decades see the people of Assam, how millions of people have been denied, and all those citizenship lists which they have been preparing, they have totally, very boldly excluded all the Muslims from there. And now see the rights of farmers, how they are, subjecting them to torture and totally denying their rights. And now we are just witnessing that the whole international world have started raising voice against it. But I don't know how this Modi government is playing their role, and it is not only a threat to India, but it is a threat to the entire region, I must
totally
say.
agree with you. Absolutely. Now, coming to you, Jalal Sahab, I fail to understand what exactly is brewing in the mind of Narendra Modi. Yes, we do talk about the Hindutva concept. We do talk about the RSS philosophy. We do talk about a different regime altogether in India. And that old ideology of secular India doesn't exist anymore. Now, sir, when we see Modi, I mean, the last time I saw his pictures was on the 26th of January on their Republic Day. The man is growing his hair, he's growing his beard, and a lot of people believe that this has been told to him by a couple of his advisors, the religious advisors. So I fail to understand what exactly is going on, sir, what this man is up to. And when you talk about the threat to the region, Let's rate him from 1 to 10. Where do you see him now? Because it seems that this man means business. Good, bad, or ugly, we don't know. Your take, sir.
Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I think because India has no more, the biggest democracy of the world, it is now the biggest theocracy of the world. So therefore, I think Mr. Modi has adopted that role now, probably to rule India like a king. And as you said, somebody must have advised him about this, that no matter what the economic conditions of the people of India is, no matter how many farmers commit suicide or what is happening on the streets of India, but the BJP and the RSS must rule. So I think that is what their ultimate goal seems to be. But coming back to what we are saying is, in relation to the solidarity with the people of Kashmir, which is tomorrow, I would very briefly like to read two quotations to first remind the Biden administration about the human rights violations not only in Kashmir but in the rest of India, and that is from Thomas Jefferson, uh, which he said while drafting the American Declaration of Independence. And I quote, he said, if rulers exceeded their constitutional authority, uh, the people would, in principle, be justified if they resorted to an armed revolt. So I'm sure that Mr. Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they have already expressed, their serious concerns on the human rights violations all over the world, particularly in India, and particularly those of the Muslims and the Kashmiris. So we hope that now the situation will change and they will take a much serious note of what is happening in India. Secondly, I would also like to remind, all the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council by telling them, by reading to them only one article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights out of the 30 articles, and it says, quote, whereas it is essential that a man is not to be compelled to have a recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. So I think they need to take cognizance of their own universal declarations of human rights. And if they do not do that, then we will see India moving towards a genocide of most of the minorities, particularly in Kashmir, and now what you referred to, the poor Sikh farmers, whose livelihood is being trampled upon, and of course, the Muslims and all other minorities in India, uh, which are now living under the worst possible conditions
Correct.
in the world. So Pakistan and the government of Pakistan, I think, uh, needs to actually now brief the US government, particularly the US Secretary of State, the US Defense Secretary, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, and the important members of the OIC and the EU. Perhaps, Pakistan was planning to arrange a summit level OIC meeting on Kashmir, on the plight of minorities, particularly the Muslims in Pakistan. I don't know if that is going to happen because of the COVID situation, but I think at least the OIC meeting at the foreign ministerial level needs to be held at Islamabad, and I think that is in the offing. And in that meeting, I think stakeholders from the non-OIC countries whose interests are directly related to peace and stability in South Asia would also be invited. And I would include in that, I think, the important officials from the Biden administration, a large number of US senators and congressmen need to be invited. And I think important officials from the P5 countries should also be should be invited to attend that specific conference in Pakistan on Kashmir and on the plight of the Indian Muslims.
All right. Jain Saab, and Hamid Khan Saab, we have been just joined in by one of our friend from India, Mandeep Singh Bajwa Saab. He's a senior columnist and a journalist. Let's hear him and let's see what he has to share with us regarding the ongoing protests. What is the current status? Mandeep Saab, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World.
Please ask the question.
Well, I haven't asked you a question yet, sir, but I would like you to, in fact, inform us and all those who are watching you on TV about the current status, any negotiations between the government and the farmers, or what exactly is happening, despite the fact that the government has offered them that they can halt this particular decision for another 18 months, which is not at all acceptable to the Indian farmers. And though the Indians believe, or the government of BJP believes, that this is an internal issue of India, but due to human rights, I mean, because that is the primary concern here, it has been internationalized. Look at the kind of tweets by Rihanna and Greta, for that matter, and there is the police of Delhi has also registered a case against one of them. Your take, sir.
Well, the BJP has massively overreacted to tweets by Rihanna and Greta. In fact, within the country, there's a lot of skepticism over the manufactured, sort of contrived efforts to counter tweets by these Western celebrities. And, there's a lively, in fact, even vigorous, at times abusive debate going on this matter itself. And, the BJP has got some Indian celebrities, actors as well as sports persons to react, which seem rather contrived because, they all speak the same language. So that's that. But then the BJP is known for these things. As far as the protests are concerned and negotiations, they're at a standstill. Both sides have taken a hard line, and the matter is now under discussion in Parliament. The budget session of Parliament is underway, and the opposition has scored a victory by getting discussion on the farm protests agreed to by the government, which initially they had, sort of stonewalled that. But ultimately they had to agree. And I was watching today, there was a lively debate and a number of good points were made by some of the opposition speakers. I didn't hear any of the government ones, but let's see what they have to come up with. And the situation is, very delicate. It's delicately poised. But ultimately, at the end of the day, only talks can rectify this, and we can only move forward through talks. And both sides, have to be less obdurate and come to some sort of compromise. Otherwise, the prolonged agitation and the BJP's efforts to stymie it using all their efforts, all the kind of even dirty tricks, I'd say, causing a lot of damage to the body politic. Let's hope better sense prevails and that we're able to come to a resolution, because
Absolutely.
as I said, I've said earlier also, 70% of India's population lives in the villages, and they're all dependent on agriculture, more or less. And you cannot, wish them away. You cannot wish their interests away. You cannot stymie their grievances, and you have to resolve them. And that is what I wish the government should come to some sort of logical conclusion, and not try and use all the repressive measures of the state to try and keep the farmers away from their logical resolution of their grievances.
Now, Mandeep Singh Saab, you talked about the repressive approach or the measures taken by the BJP government, and we're also talking about the human rights violations taking place there. And when you talk about the farmers of India, they have a very legitimate right, and they have a very, very genuine concern, because at the end of the day, sir, it's all about the living standards and the livelihood. Over here, it seems that the agitation is going on, and it's been almost 3 months. Whatever proposals have been given by the government, they are not acceptable to the farmers, and whatever the farmers are asking for, that is not acceptable to the government. So where is it leading? Do you think, because since you talked about negotiations, you talked about proper talks that would lead the way forward, but it seems that there is a deadlock, and what exactly could happen, sir? Do you think who is going to give in at some stage?
It depends on who blinks first. I would say that, the government should blink first. I mean, you can't have this sort of situation. And even trying to stop them from entering capital, that is wrong. I remember in 1988, the same farmer unions, and in fact, the father of, the man who is now the mass leader of the protest, Mr. Taket, his father, Mr. Mahendra Singh Taket, had brought in 5 lakh farmers right in the heart of New Delhi, right next to the Janpath, where the Republic Day parade takes place. That's what's called the Boat Club lawn. 5 lakhs, and they stayed there for a week, and no effort was made to stop them from coming in, and they were allowed to stay there. In fact, they were provided facilities so that they don't feel neglected, and ultimately the government agreed to their demands. So this sort of hardline repressive approach cannot work. The governments must be sensitive, and they must remember that these are your people, your base. This is from where everything stems from. Your workforce in the cities also comes from the villages.
Absolutely.
Your military is wholly recruited from the villages. Farmers, and look at the way people from abroad, everywhere, people who have sowed the land for 2 or 3 generations, that coming back, remembering their roots, and joining the protest. So the government must take a balanced approach, and you cannot do this sort of thing. And I've been advocating to government ministers and all to adopt a softer approach, a more balanced approach. But it seems that they have other things in mind. Well, they won't work. This hardline approach cannot work. It hasn't worked anywhere, and certainly not in India.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mandeep Saab, thank you so much for your comments, sir. And inshallah, we'll be having you again next week in the programs if we do one on this particular issue. But thank you very much for your comments. Now, coming to you, Hamid Khan Saab, interestingly, their own journalist, their own columnist, and he's a very senior person based in India. And he says that the issue has been internationalized now. It seems, whether you talk about the international celebrities talking about this issue or otherwise, because the way this particular problem has been highlighted by the international media, I think Kashmir issue hasn't been. But still, yet in one way or the other, you can link, you can tell the world that this is what is happening to the minorities inside India. Look at the number of Sikh population that are in the Indian army. Primarily, that's huge. Exactly. Look at the number of, the total workforce of India, out of which 50% are related to the agriculture sector. And 50%, if that is related to agriculture, just imagine the number of people working in Haryana as well as in Punjab and elsewhere. Majority of them are Sikhs. Now, what I'm saying is that, don't you think this is it's a breaking point for them? And perhaps it seems that the government is not going to negotiate. So where will it lead? And again, as I asked the gentleman in Delhi about the logical conclusion. So what do you think? What sort of a logical conclusion should be a win-win situation for both the parties? Your take, sir.
Thank you very much, Faisal. As Mr. Mandeep was talking about the budget session and talking about the opposition, I would like to tell one thing that in wordings of opposition, that this Indian current government is run by MAD, M-A-D. They said it is run by Modi, Amit Shah, and Ajit Deval, which is making the country run by a triangle of mad three people. How can we expect any kind of sense prevailing from them, while what they are doing exactly to the Sikhs in India, in Punjab, Haryana, and Arunachal Pradesh, and on the other hand, what they are doing to the Kashmiris? I would like to bring another point, here. And Faisal, if you look into the situation, imagine if this protest would have been done by the Kashmiris in Delhi. Would there not be a pellet guns to blind hundreds and thousands of Kashmiris? Would there not be a shooting straight bullet firing towards the Kashmiris and killing hundreds of Kashmiris? Would there not be detaining thousands of Kashmiris if they would have tried to march towards the Red Fort and unfurl the Indian flag? This is the, I would say that still Indian government, they knew, as you have mentioned, that there is a rebellion, sort of rebellion in Indian army for the Sikh officers, and they understand that what is happening in India is like a repetition of 1984, when they tried to demolish the Sikh movement of Khalistan. You have seen this, this farmer union. You have seen the words and voices of talking about Khalistan, about the rights of Sikhs. And I would say the difference between handling of Sikhs and Kashmiris are still have a huge difference. The reason is financially Sikhs are a bit stronger in India. Then they have a big support around the world. We have seen a support for the Sikhs is much more than the Kashmiris around the world. And then lastly, but I would say that this is another point, that when we talk about the Kashmiris is a struggle, and Kashmiris fight for their freedom is still not that much violent. They still want to get their right of self-determination with a democratic struggle, and with the fighting for their just right. Yes, you're right that I don't expect anything from the current government that they would be able to have any resolve easily, but they are going to make the matter worse. And farmers are very much determined to get their right. Indian government had offered them to suspend these amendments, and they said we don't want to have it suspended. We want them to be cancelled, and we want them not to be talked about it again. Then we have seen a very controversial decision from the Supreme Court of India, which appointed a four-persons body to resolve the issue, where all of those four parties, nominees have already given their opinion in favor of Modi government. So this was again, I would say, a dictated decision by Supreme Court, which was not accepted by the farmers. Now, if we talk about what's happening in Kashmir, as tomorrow is the Kashmir Solidarity Day for Kashmiris, this is the time when world needs to wake up for the Kashmiris, and needs to know that what is happening for the minorities in India. And especially, again, we talk about 8 million Kashmiris who are living in a biggest prison of the world, who are living under the atrocities of Kashmir, of Indian soldiers, of so-called soldiers. I don't even call them. They are coward people with the guns to shoot anyone. They are not the professional
The
soldiers.
trigger
How
happy
a
army, huh?
professional, yeah, how can a soldier think to rape a woman? How can a soldier burn the houses? And how can a soldier, ruin the crops and ruin the gardens of apples and all their financial,
That's
support
correct,
and
sir.
meanings? This this is not an army. This is a rogue army. That is the right word. And I always say that India, under this mad administration, is doing a war crimes in Kashmir. And this is a time when world needs to know, and world needs to resist. And there is only two way to resist it. People ask me, what is the solution? What world can do? I always say, when world can put the sanctions on countries like Sudan when there was East Timor issue, why world cannot put the sanctions on India?
Again,
Then
sir,
there
it's
is a
all about the
solution.
political economy and the size of India and the
Exactly.
middle class they have and the kind of
Exactly.
interest,
But
the
Faisal, there is
international.
again,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, but
yeah,
there is
so
again a
I'll
point.
come back to you on that, sir. But ma'am,
Yeah.
whenever there is a situation, and especially when you talk about India, India is a nuclear state, it has problems with Nepalese, they have problems with Chinese, they have problems with Pakistan, almost all the neighbors. But most interestingly, now look at the second regime, whatever has been done, whether you talk about the application of Article 370 and 35A regarding Kashmir, or you talk about the CAA law. Again, the minorities and in particular Muslims have been hurt in that. And now you talk about another huge issue, and that is about the Sikh farmers. Farmers in general, but primarily Sikh farmers. Ma'am, whenever there is a situation of this sort or talking about a problem of this magnitude, ma'am, there are certain solutions. And one of the solution which could be suggested to Modi is to, open up some external front. Let's start having a war with Pakistan or go for a misadventure or something of that, so that the attention of the global media and the local media is diverted there, and whatever they want to do otherwise, and then they can always say, for the sake of the state, all the protesters should go home because we are in a state of war. What's the probability of that? A lot of people are talking about it.
Lots of people are talking about that, and we have been hearing this, that Modi has in its mind one of these tactics, to use.
This is
to
one of the options.
One of the options to divert the attention, to just hush away all the concerns within India. But we have again to reiterate and say that Modi has been the product of all the atrocities and madness he had done in Gujarat, and gaining confidence, from Gujarat incidents where he had, killed hundreds and thousands of people there, and based on that he had gained popularity, and then he used this Hindutva philosophy, and using the same, strategy he is capitalizing within India. And after that, we have seen that how Modi has, taken these, implemented these draconian laws in Kashmir and deploying 900,000 of army. Now they have issued 3.3 million, domiciles, to the people to get settled there, to disturb the demography, so that if at any stage and point of time when United Nations decides to have a census over there, they can prove that the Muslims are not in majority. And if we see how, replying to your question, even in 2021, in one month, there have been 175 ceasefire violations.
That's correct.
And they have been every
Last
day.
year,
Yes.
3,300.
Yeah, so it was just this 2021 I am talking, 175 ceasefire violations.
1 month.
1 month.
Just imagine.
So also see all the killings and the people who have been injured, and all his violations on the border, and we see how they have deployed so much army, and they are not allowing United Nations military observer groups to come here and visit and see the situation. It speaks itself, the volume about all the atrocities in Kashmir. And if we see, even in 1.5 years, there have been more than 300 people killed in Kashmir. So now the whole world has to take notice of it, apart from having their economic interest, because if anywhere else such thing happens, recently there was some insurgency in Rohingya, and there was a statement from United States. So even here, it is one of the biggest jails of the world, where people are totally in detention, having all their economy destroyed. All the kids and children, living in Kashmir have no access to education, have no access to normalcy. They are all, suffering a bad trauma. So we have to expose
They
all
are
this.
treated as second or maybe third grade citizens, ma'am.
Third-rate citizen, and we have to now expose to the world at night that what is happening on the ground. We have to connect, we have to invite all those, human rights organizations and big organizations to come and see and report. We have to, not only put the data, but also the human interest stories. We have to just project it as a cultural diplomacy as well, because the whole world has to now focus on it, because it's not an issue of India doing it in a mad way, all the atrocities, because it is moving
It is totally
towards
planned, and they have a design, and
yes.
they have an objective primarily.
Yes,
and
yes.
that objective is to impose the Hindu mindset
Exactly.
over the others, and that is not possible. That is not going to happen. Forget about the Muslims or the Sikhs. I mean, you talk about Jains, you talk about Dalits, forced conversions, ma'am. They are taking place.
In fact, the people of India has to now, take notice of it, because what Modi is doing, he is just following his own mad philosophy. After it is too late and the people of India realize that what they have been doing has been damaging their own country, their own lives, their own, secular India.
Correct.
Now we have to, people of India has to take, cognizance of this situation in India, and we have to now again support along with other international players by exposing Modi, because it is going to, further destabilize the region if it is just going
Absolutely,
unnoticed.
ma'am. And looking at the current situation, I mean, and this is not a joke. This is an area where you have 3 confirmed nuclear powers, and maybe the 4th one is on its way. So you can't take this region, I mean, in the way it has been handled till now. Jalsa, there was a statement about, not about a week ago, maybe about a week ago, by the UN Secretary General, urging Pakistan and India, both the countries, to seriously discuss their problems. And whenever we talk about the problem, the first problem is Kashmir, and Indians are not ready to talk, and they believe this is their internal problem. And why should Pakistan be a part? I believe it's not a unilateral issue, it's not a bilateral or a trilateral. It's a quadrilateral issue, primarily because now the Chinese, they are also one of the stakeholders. Janal Sahab, your take, sir.
Yes, I heard that, I think, comment, and then when the UN Secretary General was asked a question by APP representative, so he made some very significant observations, which I think he had made earlier also. And the first observation that he made was that the issue of Kashmir is not an internal issue of India. It is an international dispute which needs to be resolved through the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Secondly, he said that after the unilateral Indian government actions, unfortunately, the issue of Kashmir has moved in the wrong direction. And thirdly, he had said that the only way to resolve this issue is for India and Pakistan to sit together and negotiate. So this is what he has said. But I think it is the permanent members of the UN Security Council which need to understand the gravity of the situation. And as you said, there are 3 nuclear powers which are involved now in the matter, and in addition to the Kashmiris themselves. And it is endangering not only peace in the whole of Asia, but it could endanger the world peace, stability, as well as prosperity, particularly, in this COVID environment. The earlier they, address and redress this issue, the better it would be. I'd also like to add that, again, when tomorrow is this Kashmir Day, so the Kashmiris now know that, the people of Pakistan, across the political divide, the government of Pakistan, the armed forces of Pakistan, I think they are with the Kashmiri people. And the Kashmiri people, they know now, and they've declared, they've resolved that they are prepared to die for their freedom. The government of India needs to know that. Also, the government of India needs to learn, lessons from what is happening close by in Afghanistan, where, NATO, ISAF, they spent 2 decades there, spent over $1 trillion, but they could not succeed primarily because there was no local support, no support of the population. So if they do not have the support of the population, their policies regarding Kashmir are totally untenable. And the longer they try to pursue these policies, this is going to endanger eventually Indian security itself. India is already paying a very big price in terms of its defense budget. And you must have seen last week they were compelled to increase their defense budget by 19%, despite the fact that their economy had gone down by minus 10%. And this is all because of their policies as it relates to Kashmir and to other minorities. Bulk of their forces are now committed in internal security duties. And when it comes to, their Cold War with China, I think they have now a perpetual deployment and employment of at least 300,000 troops. And so all these things, they do not augur well for India or the people of India, or for peace in the subcontinent, of peace in Asia. There is also, a very close linkage
All
of
right.
peace in Kashmir and also in Afghanistan. So the US administration, the UN Security Council needs to understand that as well.
All right. Now, last quick comment from you, Hamid Khan Sahab, and that is regarding the 5th of February. Now, we all understand the sort of issues those people are going through. But again, I mean, Pakistan has always supported them, whether you talk about the moral support or you talk about the diplomatic support or you talk about the political support. Now, a lot of people, a lot of analysts whom I talk to, they say that they need physical support as well. Because this is the time whether you should be with them 100% or otherwise just by issuing statements will not serve the purpose. Do you think, sir, this issue, looking at the current government in the United States of America, when Mr. Joe Biden, who is a champion of human rights, and he always talks about it, and the vice president even, do you think this man can make a difference as far as Kashmir is concerned? Because he has always spoken about it, and he believes that Pakistan is equally important. Your take, sir.
Faisal, I think he will be much better than previous Trump administration. There is no doubt about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and her statements, and they both are committed in terms of where they see human rights violations and where they see what India is doing to the minorities. I always believe that they will definitely give a tough time to Modi, but again, I would say that there is no, I have no hope from the, Modi government that they will understand even a Joe Biden's language. Yes, you're right. There might be a time very sooner or later that where they have to be taught lesson physically what we taught them in 1965, and this is the way. I mean, this will be concluded. And one more thing, Faisal, that
Yeah.
I believe that Modi is again, misguiding his own people, and Modi has turned India into a biggest, I should say, racist country. We have seen what the entire public is reacting against of one tweet of Rihanna. Then we have seen what Modi is turning his own nation. Eventually, India will break into parts because of this extremist Hindutva RSS ideology and what they are trying to follow, their chunky ideology. It will divide India into pieces, and Modi will be known as the Gorbachev of India, who has turned India into many countries. And this is written on the wall now. It is sooner or later the world will see that, and it is not because of Pakistan. It will not be because of any other country. It will be because of India itself. It will be
Yeah.
because of Indian and Hindutva ideology itself, where they have no tolerance for the minorities, where they treat Kashmiris as their conquered slave colony of 17th century. This is the classic example. What they are treating to Kashmiris,
That's
it
correct, sir.
looks like it's a slave colony of any country of 17th century. So how can these things can sustain in 21st century? I believe that this is the written on the wall, that Modi will be known as the Gorbachev of India, because this is what's going to happen. And Pakistan and people of Pakistan are always standing with the Kashmir and Kashmiris. And if there will be a physical encounter, as Pakistan DGISPR has said, that we are ready to fight for the last bullet and last soldier. This is our message for the India, and this is our message for our Kashmiri
All right, sir.
brothers. We will fight for them.
All right. Hamid Saab, thank you very much. General Raza, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your presence as well. And ma'am, always great to have you in a show. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you again. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.